So recently I was asked a question on whether you could use erasable markers on the hex tiles, and that's something I hadn't actually really thought of doing before, but I thought it was a really good idea, so I wanted to run this test. And so kind of why would you want to do that? So here you have your hex tiles. One thing you could potentially do is draw sort of little roads or whatever on it. Say you're playing D&D, you can use these to mark your different characters or sort of resources and move them around. This would sort of be great for playing lots of different games, but also for playtesting different new designs. But there's a question of how durable sort of will the marks be, and how easily do they come off, because if they're sort of permanently on there, then it's not sort of as useful. So I set up this test, and so at the top, these two were using wet erase markers, and then this one down here is using a dry erase marker. And so if you're printing them yourself, depending on the bed that you're using, you could sort of print them with a textured surface or a smooth surface. The ones I sell on Etsy all have this textured surface. I don't know how clearly they come up on camera, so I wrote sort of textured or smooth on them. And so what we're going to do is sort of test how both the marker stays on the tiles and then how easily they come off of the tiles. So to start with, and so on each one I wrote, it's a little clearer, so I wrote 24 hours ago, 1 hour, I wrote that on there an hour ago, and then 5 minutes just before sort of starting to film this. And so I think let's start with the dry erase ones. And so the first thing I'm going to do, this is another sort of textured hex, is I'm just going to kind of rub it on there a little bit and see how well it sort of stays in place. So that actually looks pretty good. Now this is sort of two smooth ones. And so here, definitely the 24-hour one stayed on better than the hour or the 5-minute one. I don't know if maybe not surprising that the dry erase one is going to be a little less durable. But let's see how easy it actually sort of comes off of the tiles. So here, definitely on the smooth one, so one of the reasons I like the textured is that you see less sort of print lines. I'm definitely seeing the marks sit in some of those print lines, and it looks a little sort of cloudier sort of than it was. Let's see, on the textured one, kind of the same thing. Actually, maybe the texture helps sort of hide some of it a little bit. So it definitely came off, but there's definitely sort of a darkening there. But for the most part, that worked overall. And seemed, on the textured, it seemed to sort of stay on there reasonably, a little more actually durably than it did on the smooth one. So let's have a look at the wet erase. So these are basically the same. I just sort of set up some backups. So let's start with this one. So that seems to have stayed on there pretty well, sort of across all time points. The smooth. Kind of same thing, so that looks pretty good, and that's not a big surprise for sort of wet erase markers. That's kind of what makes them nice. So let's be a little more vigorous. And so this is sort of just a dry paper towel. That seems to be pretty durable. Same thing there on the smooth. Maybe a little bit came off. Now I'm just going to use kind of my finger. Maybe, well, my hands were a little dirty already, but it didn't really seem to wipe off too much. So the smooth one, definitely, gotta try to make sure I'm using the same pressure. So little smearing, definitely more smearing on the smooth one, particularly at the 5 minute and 1 hour. The 24 hours seems to have mostly stayed on there well. So let's try now with the water. So let me make sure I don't hit these other ones. All right, so smooth. Okay, so with one hit, there's definitely a little bit of red left over. The other colors seem to have gone away. Let's see if we can work that a little more. Helped a little bit. I don't know how well it comes up on camera, but there's definitely a little bit of a red mark in the middle. The blue and the black seem to go away pretty well. So let's try the textured one. So kind of the same thing there. The blue and the black definitely seem to erase easiest, and there's a little bit of a red sort of left in the middle. So the red, I guess I didn't say this, so those 3 marks were made 24 hours ago too. But the black, yeah, the black and the blue seem to sort of go away pretty cleanly. So that sort of does tell you a little bit, the sort of marker that's used specifically will kind of make a difference there. Overall, I'd say this is actually a lot more promising than I thought, particularly for the textured. I would have assumed that this would have sort of hindered your ability to wipe the marker off more, but actually it seems like it made the markings both more durable, just because I think there's less sort of surface contact, and they're kind of just as easy to wipe off. So this seems like this could be a pretty viable tool for sort of writing on like that. Yeah, that just doesn't. Yeah, I would have expected sort of that to have sort of come off a lot more from that, but and that cleans up pretty well. So I'm reluctant to sort of fully endorse this, you know, just given sort of how pricey both printing or buying these tiles can be, given sort of that some marks may show up. I guess let's actually look. Let's try. So I don't know if this is sort of, since this is right now, if the red one, if being on the gray, kind of might help and sort of show up a little less, whereas the white is definitely, it's both gonna, the colors that, you know, what you write in there is gonna pop a little more, but it also means that sort of if it stains, it'll show up more. So there's some very fresh red. So that holds, yeah. So let's see how well that comes off. Yeah, so again, I don't know how well this will actually show up on the camera, but there's definitely a little bit of red staining. So it seems, yeah, man, so it seems like it's going to be a little marker dependent. But so far it seems like the black and the blue really come off pretty cleanly. So, I don't want to fully endorse, do this, I guess, a little bit at your own risk, but it does seem like it's a viable option, and you may want to sort of test specific colors and markers. So in this case, these are Expo wet erase markers. The dry erase one was just kind of a generic one I had in another game. That one definitely left more staining on both the textured and the smooth. It's much more apparent on the smooth than the textured. The advantage of both the texture and in this case sort of the marbled filament is that it sort of helps sort of hide some of that a little bit. I guess I should also be clear, so the ones that I sell are all printed in Polyterra PLA, and so there's a different materials if you're printing your own may react differently to, you know, each of these markers. But let's try this black one fresh. Yeah, so that really, yeah, that came out really clean. So anyway, this actually ended up being, I really thought they would sort of stain them more. This was a lot more productive than I actually sort of expected it to be. But hopefully that gives you some cool ideas and new ways to use the hex tiles. And thanks for watching.